I think there's a lot of merit Sonic 06 does have in its own right that people outright refuse to acknowledge because they're afraid of being slaughtered by the liberal mainstream media. Well, I'm here to provide the backbone next-gen truthers have been too afraid to have for too long. The kiss was a good decision. Okay, maybe not that far, but it does have some good qualities. Aside from that, in fact, there are things I like about its story. I know many casual Sonic fans have complained it's too complex, as their fragile minds struggle with comprehending things more intricate than going from left to right, but I actually found it quite simple. See this chart for guidance. With its intersecting Sonic, Shadow, Silver campaign streamlined from Sonic Adventure 1-6, it truly is the Pulp Fiction of the Sonic franchise. Really though, there is something oddly compelling about the way they're woven together. Like, I'm not going to pretend SA1 didn't do that too or anything, but with the fewer storylines to keep track of, I'd say it almost feels like it means more when they do cross. It sort of makes it feel like that much more like, oh snap, when they do, since the game's world does feel pretty big. Also, having the 3 campaigns to go along with this game being ostensibly Sonic Adventure 3 is pretty satisfying. Speaking of, Silver is cool, man, even if this game features only his second best characterization. With Sonic and Shadow being the clear equivalents of Goku and Vegeta, adding Silver to this installment as the surrogate for Trunks also makes a lot of sense from a series development perspective, and it's even outright said in some development documents that this was the case. The time travel element makes all around sense, as Sonic Adventure 1 has sort of a classic big bad, Adventure 2 saw Eggman literally conquering space, so 06 appropriately tackles time. It's a natural progression. It's also good in Silver, Blaze, and her second appearance after Rush, was given a group to belong to. We also got Sonic Man, arguably the greatest character in all of fiction. The time travel element does end up making some of the plot nigh incomprehensible, but it has its moments. It lays out an easy to understand motivation for Silver, and also gives way to probably one of the most shocking story elements in the entire series. Yeah, people don't really talk about this. Elise and Eggman straight up die. It seems like when it comes up in discourse, it's always used as some sort of critique of the game's story, but like, this is actually really interesting and unexpected. It's a genuine surprise. Sure, it ends up getting undone, but it gives this sense of weight to things, and the darker moments of the story are honestly pretty engaging. Sonic dies too, but I really don't want to talk about that. Mephiles is also pretty cool in concept, which Sega knows I'm right about, by the way. That's why they keep putting him in stuff. This game was very fascinating to me as a kid because I didn't even know it was a video game. This channel, Shadow of Fire 123, sweet username by the way, uploaded the cutscenes the same week the game came out and ambiguously titled them things like Sonic Story Part 1 and stuff like that. This is how I first saw them, so I thought it was a movie. You gotta understand YouTube was still newer at the time. Around then the site had only been around for a little over a year, so people were uploading tons of shows and movies and parts. So being a little kid, I thought that's what this was. And I loved it. My knowledge of Sonic was also really limited. Sonic 06 was my first Sonic game, but not this one. This one. Yuck. Anyway, these were some of the first YouTube videos I ever saw just looking up Sonic on the site, so there was really this sense of intrigue to it all for me. It truly was the Pulp Fiction of Sonic games. Now the story is far from perfect, but it has bits and pieces going for it, and the voice acting really isn't too bad either. All the time. Remember, the series has always had its ups and downs with voices though.
Camera rotate, the right trigger and left trigger.
So for the track record to this point, it was a step up in many respects. Besides the story though, the game also has some pretty cool set pieces. The ruined city, the train, and the final stretch of Kingdom Valley come to mind. Like, seriously, this part is cool. And the Mach Speed segments overall laid the groundwork for the Daytime Unleashed stages that ended up structuring many of the 3D games for the 2010s, which, again, has positive qualities. Now, I swear it's probably Stockholm Syndrome or something, but I can't lie, I sort of like playing the Sonic stages. The Shadow and Silver ones have zero redeeming qualities, but Sonic's speed in the Mach segments really can be fun. Some might say they're basically uncontrollable or whatever, but I sort of like that. Like, these moments are meant to make the player's heart beat out of their chest and make them really feel like Sonic. Other games ended up being able to accomplish something similar to what these were probably going for, but I don't know, how low down the camera is too, and how close it is to Sonic, it really does try to put you in his shoes, and that's as close as we'll come to talking about his feet. I think the main problem with these parts are just how unforgiving they can be. Like, many require some really precise timing, and others just don't work at points. But honestly, these might be my favorite part of this game. They're where it really puts the speed at the forefront. Like, man, again, the end of Kingdom Valley, the energy, the music, the scale of it all, it really does a great job coming together to convey the emotions of the story. Like, let's really dissect this scene for a minute. Sonic's running through unveiled ancient ruins while the walls of water are still surrounding it. Like, it has a real Exodus thing going on, and there's all these glimmers of rainbows he passes, just pushing him forward, going, you can rest ahead. Not to mention, Sonic has a long history with water, so any fan familiar with the lore can get caught up in the emotions of seeing Sonic then conquer the water by running across the walls of it, which, by the way, is just cool in of itself. The last mainline 3D Sonic game to have him do this up to this point was Sonic Adventure 1 during the final boss, in which he's Super Sonic. Now he doesn't even need that. He's growing. A detail about this too is how Sonic physically has changed up to this point in the series. It's like we've watched him grow up. And on top of all this, the music. What a masterclass. Too bad it controls like garbage, but a masterclass. And since these are always placed at the ends of levels, reaching the goal really does give you that sense of relief like nothing else in the game. You know what, I'm gonna stop being all apologetic about this. These are cool, I don't care. And on the point of music, I'd be remiss not to mention his world. Another element I'm really glad they brought back is the hub world. Like, yeah, it's not implemented well and looks pretty bland, but I think having one in a game like this that's very focused on character interactions, or at least is supposed to be, really benefits from having them. Sonic Adventure 1 was originally conceived as a Sonic RPG, which is why so many hub worlds and NPCs were included in the first place. As the game was eventually changed into a 3D platformer, these elements were left over and incorporated in anyway. And they bring a lot of life into the world that even games like Mario 64 somewhat lacked. And honestly, I think Adventure 2's lack of them is genuinely my biggest complaint with that game. I get the idea they wanted to keep the pacing lightning fast between levels, but it's not what I wanted. I want my big virtual dollhouse for my virtual Sonic toys. And I'm not learning the Chow Garden. It just feels like it's missing a little sense of world to me. City Escape gets at it a little, but most of it's just city skyboxes and the way backgrounds of levels. It feels like a video game instead of a world. So I do see it as a net positive that 06 made the correction of bringing them back, even if they're not perfect. I do hate that the entrances to the levels are just these ugly portal painting things though. And like, as unfinished as this game is, it has an interesting identity as its own world, in part due to that it's so isolated from the rest of the series, but with how the ending plays out, that may have ended up being Soleanna's legacy regardless. People draw all these Final Fantasy anime comparisons, but again, it's a game that's knee-deep in the mythology around its world. It's not an unnatural approach, and honestly, I don't even mind that it's not all that Sonic-y looking. I think where the game may have gone too far is fully committing to this realistic approach instead of the relatively more styled ones of the previous games, but if you look at them, they were sort of building to this throughout the 3D installments, while the 2D one stayed more traditional visually. I think where the growing pains really show are with Eggman though. Funnily enough, I think the odd quirks of his design actually come from them not going far enough with the realism. He's stuck in this weird in-between where he's just slightly too realistic, but still has his crazy costume and giant hands still intact. The game even sort of tries to go out of its way to hide his superhuman face. I don't know how much I can defend this choice, but I'm not gonna lie, it never really bothered me as much as it did for other people. I think it looks fine at some angles and less so at others. I think that they probably just thought it looked too weird to have one super stylized human in a world of realistic ones, but like, you already have things like Tails around, so who cares? The Final Fantasy thing is what everybody says when they see this cutscene during the opening, and they're not wrong, it has that feel. I'm more so drawing attention to this part just to say how good these pre-rendered cutscenes look. Like, I know this is probably bottom of the barrel praise to offer, but I'm still impressed at how good these look for nearing 20 years old. This is a praise pretty much every Sonic game gets though. Their animation for these has always looked amazing. And this is where the look for them really started, as this is when the series was shedding its plasticky look that emerged around Heroes. Though the game is still bad at its core, it's nice to see at least some people coming around to seeing both the potential and the realized qualities it has through things like Project 06. At least it doesn't control with the Wiimote like Secret Rings, which was initially in development as the Wii port for 06 by the way, and it shows. Oh yeah, one last thing that's awesome about 06. The glitches. Yeah, I don't even care it's broken. They're hilarious even when they screw you over. And while I'm at it, Sonic Underground is unironically Kino. I said it. Tiny Knuckles is great, and Sonic being in a band is fundamentally cool. Sonic, you may have survived this long purely on the objective coolness of your design, but I love you even at your lows. And believe me, there's plenty.